Hi, everyone. This is Steve Peck. Before the show begins, I wanted to let you know we placed a donation button on our website, divorcesourceradio.com. We're trying to keep this program commercial-free, and your support through donations will help us do just that. Thanks in advance for your consideration. Hi, and welcome to Divorce Source Radio, your source for information related to divorce. I'm Steve Peck, and on today's program, we're inviting the host of The Smart Divorce on Divorce Source Radio, Deborah Moskovich, to join us.
It's great to be online with Steve Peck.
It's different than hosting your own show, isn't it?
It's wonderful, though, because I love talking to you about divorce and the many different aspects, and you make me think. Mm-hmm. And isn't that what we need to do, is just think about how we can help people?
We need to think more, and that's kind of what we're doing today in the show. The title of the show is Mistakes People Make During Divorce, and we're going to talk about that. But I want to tell our listeners, a lot of them who've been listening to the Smart Divorce Radio Show, you've been on hiatus for just a little bit as we've gone through the summer, and you've been busy with your family, but you will be coming back with more Smart Divorce shows very soon, correct?
I will be coming back with lots of Smart Divorce shows very soon. As a matter of fact, I've got a great roster of guests lined up. So tune in weekly, and you will hear such fabulous guests and ideas and concepts.
And if you want to listen to some of her past shows, just visit divorcesourceradio.com, look through the archive, search The Smart Divorce with the one, the only, Deborah Moskovich, and you'll find all of her past shows, some really cool ones too. But let's get into mistakes we all make during the divorce process, Debbie.
What I've been finding in the last few weeks is all of a sudden my phone has been ringing off the hook, which is really wonderful for me. But it's made me start thinking about what's happening to people over the summer. And what I've realized is that it's slow. People are going into the summer. They really want to enjoy their time. And then come September, that's when people start thinking about the next steps. It's kind of like their New Year's resolution. The summer's over. You know, in New Year's, it's like, what am I going to do now that it's a new year? Mm-hmm. And people start thinking, the summer's over. Now what am I going to do? Yeah. And
especially if your kids are going to college, right? Because I can remember my son started Michigan State a few years ago, and during his freshman year, they had one of these parent meetings, and they had a psychologist speak to all of us, and she said, you may not know this, but the divorce rate increases. It's the empty nest syndrome. Once some of the kids go to college, then it causes people to say, now's the time, and that's what you're talking about here, I think.
That's right. And it doesn't matter if it's the gray divorce like they were talking about. You know, gray divorce is older parents. Not that everyone has gray hair, because I certainly don't.
Or hair at all.
But it's true. Individuals start reassessing their life. When your son went to college, you know, that's the thing. People start reassessing, I don't necessarily know if this is the person that I want to spend the rest of my life with. Mm-hmm. And, you know, with kids gone all summer, maybe the kids are at camp, you're a little bit more relaxed, you start thinking, you start researching. Come September, I think people really evaluate what's going to happen over the next 9 months. And many individuals start doing their due diligence. I'm not saying that everyone's going to get a divorce. And I really hope that people think twice before they make that decision. I always tell my divorce consulting clients, is this what you really want? And as a matter of fact, lawyers, and I'm not a lawyer, but when you go to a lawyer's office, they will counsel you. It's part of it's the ethics of a lawyer to say, are you sure that this is the only route for you? And so that's one of the first mistakes that parents make, is that all of a sudden they think they're not happy, but they haven't done the work that they need to do on themselves to realize whether or not divorce is the right decision for them. Why isn't their marriage working? Is it because of they're not working as a couple? Is it because of something that the individual is not happy with? Is it something that their partner is not doing that's causing them this distress? Mm-hmm. So one of the first things I do is suggest to my clients that they go for either couples counseling or for their own individual counseling.
So that's the first mistake, that we're rushing too quickly to divorce when we should really be thinking more about our relationship and maybe ways to save it first.
That's right. Don't you think so?
I absolutely do. And it's interesting when you talk about when it's back to school time, how parents start to think about that, because there's never a good time for divorce. But certainly as you move closer to holidays, it becomes even a worse time. So I guess this is like your last chance before you move into that phase.
Right. There's never a good time about divorce, and there's never a right age to divorce. And when I say right age, people say, I'm going to wait until my kids get to college. I'm going to wait until my kids get through high school, or whatever it is. Like, they're waiting for different phases. And with each stage and phase in a child's life, the way that they react to the divorce is different. So, for instance, if you have very young children, in a way, they haven't had as much family life together, and they might be impacted less than a teenager. And do you know that even adult children of divorce suffer? People think, well, my kids are now 25, 30, doesn't really matter. But you know what? They're suffering just as much, if not more, than some little kids.
Mm-hmm. That's true. It's true. It can be like disgusting. I can't believe that mom and dad would do this after all these years.
Right. After you put up with mom or dad for like 30 years, now you're doing this? Like,
right.
What happened? Or why didn't you do it earlier? Because you've been fighting for the last 25, 30, 40 years even. All I hear is fighting. And now you want peace? I wish there would have been peace when I was younger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, I think the best window is from birth to about 3 years old, because a lot of the kids just don't really understand what's going on. Beyond that,
yeah, you've got a good point. So it kind of becomes a way of life for them,
right? And
maybe if you're young enough, your children are young enough. Oftentimes, people remarry or get into a significant relationship, so you will still have that family, the intact family. Now, I really hate labels. I wrote an article for the Huffington Post about the broken home. Is your home broken? And I couldn't believe the response I was getting from people, because I hate that label of a broken home. So just because there's two parents at home doesn't necessarily mean that their home is intact and somebody else's isn't, because there aren't two parents living at home either. But I do think that when you're young enough to start over, rather than live with conflict for many years, it's something to think about.
What do you prefer over broken home, just from a terminology point of view?
A single-parent household.
Single parent.
I'm not into labels. I really,
right.
do we have to say something? I never say to my kids, I'm a single mother, or I'm your mom. So I don't like to get into that frame of thinking. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah. I mean, we're all very hooked on labels, and broken, yeah. It does sound it sounds broke. It just sounds broke.
Yeah, and I have to tell you something. I think that I'm not perfect, believe me, and I've made lots of mistakes. But if an outsider looked at my home, other than physically looked at my home, yeah, it's kind of falling apart in places. But if we really looked at what went on with my kids and my relationship with my children, they'd see a pretty dynamic household full of love. Mm-hmm. And if you look at some homes with two parents living at home, these latchkey kids where latchkey kids where the parents are never home, or the parents were always fighting. Like, does that make them a more functional household than my home or your home? Good point. No. So I think that there's no, absolutely. So I think that there are so many things that people need to think about. So first mistake is your marriage really over? Is this really what you want? Think about it.
And how do we do that? What are the steps we take to evaluate that?
I think that there's a lot of soul searching. For me, I think that I really help guide my clients and try to send them to a therapist, be it a social worker, a psychiatrist, a psychologist, someone who can help them think things through. Now, therapy's not for everyone, so just take the time to think things through, even looking at reading self-help books, journaling. I just find that if you take some time to think about it and think it through, you'll get some clarity. So however you do it, with a therapist, on your own, maybe with an advisor, like a neutral, a friend who can really be neutral. Clergy is a great neutral third party. Some kind of mentor. I don't know. Do you have any other ideas?
I don't. That about covers it. I mean, you have to talk to somebody and work it through.
You have to talk to someone. Now, one of the things that I believe about a smart divorce, and this is what I tell people all the time and I write about it, is that being happy, being smart post-divorce is hard work. A marriage is hard work. A relationship is hard work. Being a parent is hard work. Anything that is going to give you some great results is hard work. So being happy post-divorce is hard work. So don't you think it's important to take the time going through the process to make that decision to alleviate the stress of thinking of the hard work? Let me tell you, this is what I mean, because I know that was kind of a convoluted explanation. In 10 years from now, do you know how many people have said, 10 years from the divorce, I've had many people say to me, I wish I would have worked hard at my marriage. If I would have known how hard divorce was, that the grass wasn't necessarily greener on the other side, I might not have made that choice to divorce. But if you did that work up front, then you might not have those regrets later on. So that if you knew ultimately that divorce was the only way to go, 10 years from the point of being divorced, post-divorce, then you say to yourself, as bad as things got, as hard as it is, you know what? I made the right decision. And that's what I mean. You've got to do that soul searching up front so that no matter how difficult it gets, you've made the right decision.
Can you work through any issue? What I mean by that is, when you're working through a divorce, when you're evaluating, do we stay, do we go? There are some issues like an affair where for some people, that's instantly, we're not going to work through that. I can't get over that.
I tell you what. When you lose trust, respect, and you have no communication, what kind of relationship is that, right? So an affair is something that will be the catalyst for many to choose to leave the marriage. On the other hand, if your partner is a little bit more open-minded and they say, what is it that I've done or what is it that we've done together that made my partner want to look outside to have the affair? So there are couples, I have to tell you, there are lots of couples that are able to move past that affair and to regain and rekindle what they had at the beginning. Like, what was it? Maybe someone was so consumed in their career that they really did forget about their spouse. Or maybe as a parent, and this happens for a lot of women, probably myself included, that when your kids are young, the kids become the focus. I hear this all the time. Your kids, all you're doing is running for your children. And if you've got a job, so you're running for your kids, you're working on your career, you're probably managing the household. There's so much that you do. And at the end of the day, you have little energy left for your partner, for your spouse. So there are a lot of men out there who feel really neglected. You're shaking your head. I'm sure you've heard this before, many times. And I think that if the couple sort of steps back and looks at what went wrong and the dynamics in the relationship, maybe they're able to move past that affair.
I would love to do a show with some of those people, the ones that have experienced an affair but yet found a way to make it. I find that fascinating.
Isn't it? Now, there's a great show that we did, I don't know if you remember, with Emily Brown. And we talked about the anatomy of an affair. So if our listeners today are in that situation and want to know more about affairs and explore more about affairs, I think that's a great show to listen to. The Anatomy of Affair with Emily Brown. So that's one thing. You've got to do the soul searching up front. The next thing, what are some of the mistakes? I think that people need to be more aware of their finances. How many people do you know divorce without having any clue about their finances?
Oh, tons.
Now, and just a minute, forget about getting divorced. How many people are in marriages that have no clue about their finances. Now, I will tell you, I met with a broker a while ago, and she said to me, that's a really good thought. She deals with very high net worth clients, and she asked some of her clients if they really understood the finances of what was happening in the family. And 8 out of the 10 women she was meeting with had no idea about their finances. Now, these were all happily married women. Mm-hmm. So she said to them, like, this has nothing to do about divorce, but don't you think you need to know what's going on in your family?
Absolutely.
And I think that's the next step then, is just not taking an interest or, a care or concern about what's happening in your family finances. So, listeners, number 2. Number 1 is the soul searching. Number 2 is understand your finances. Where's the money coming in? How's it going out? What are your assets? What are your liabilities?
But how do you do that once you're right in the middle of divorce? I mean, you should know it before. That's what we're saying. So if you're listening very early on, I mean, you should kind of know it. I mean, sometimes one partner knows it, the other doesn't. But I find that a lot of just both don't really have that much of a clue. So if you're thrown into a divorce, then, and let's say you're a housewife and your husband's working, now do you have to use the divorce process with your attorney to do a little investigative work to figure that out, or can you just get the record yourself?
No, that's a good point. So there are a few different things that you can do. If there is no financial disclosure, like if you cannot get that information from your husband or wife at all, it's going to go through the lawyers to get the full financial disclosure. And when you think about it, all the paperwork going back and forth between the lawyer's office to get that full financial disclosure costs you thousands. It could cost you thousands of dollars. So if you're upfront honest, look at all the money you could be saving and putting towards family finances. Now, if you don't know what the finances are and you really want to get an idea of, for instance, you're at the very beginning of the process, you want to fill out your financial statement, but there are lots of things that you can do. If you have a joint bank account, what's to stop you from going to the bank and getting photocopies of your statements? Like, just so you can understand what's coming in and going out of your bank statement. A lot of couples have joint accounts. Mm-hmm. If you have joint accounts, maybe you have a joint, a broker. There's nothing stopping you from calling your broker to try to get some information. Go to your bank manager. Now, what about your phone company, your cell phone company, your heat, hydro, and all that kind of stuff? Maybe the files are at home. There's nothing to stop you from looking at the files. I'm not saying to be nosy, but hey, you have a right to know how much it costs to run your home. Mm-hmm. Or if you can't find that information, why can't you call the hydro company yourself, the heat company, the phone company? Like, you can make those phone calls too and get at least a rough idea of what your expenses are on a monthly basis.
Right.
You can even call the bank. Now that I'm thinking, now you got me going. Call the bank. Find out about your mortgage. How's your mortgage being paid? Chances are both parties, both the husband and wife's name is on the deed or, mm-hmm. On the paperwork. So you have just as much right to call the bank as your partner does to get that information. Are you paying your mortgage weekly? Are you paying it monthly? All of these things make a huge difference.
Yeah, except what if you haven't really addressed the divorce situation with your spouse, and now you're gathering this information, you're calling the broker, and, the chance of the broker calling, the husband and go, hey, your wife's calling for all this information, what's up? Is that going to send up red flags and put you in a very difficult situation? Possibly, right?
Okay, so Steve, you're playing devil's advocate, and yes, it could put you in a very precarious position. What I would suggest is that anyone listening to the show, you might want to talk to a lawyer about your finances and to give you some guidance to protect yourself financially. So that, for instance, let me give you an idea here of what just happened to a client of mine. She had a joint bank account with her husband. They had a joint line of credit, and he ended up taking out more money than my client was aware of from the line of credit. Do you know that she was still responsible for that additional loan?
Really?
So Yeah, so whereas she thought she was responsible for $10,000, she was actually responsible for $25,000. He took out an additional $15,000. So you see, if there are any kind of charge cards, there's another one. So if you have two charge cards together, you've got one is the primary card holder and one is the secondary card holder. Do you know what that is? Maybe I should explain that. Is the primary card holder is the one where the initial bill goes to, but the secondary card holder has the same credit card number, and the bill goes to the primary card holder. Like I have that with my kids. I'm the primary card holder and they're the secondary card holder, right? So oftentimes somebody's thinking about divorce and will end up putting huge expenses on their credit cards. Like I heard someone going out and buying $20,000 worth of jewelry or having quite a bit of plastic surgery done. And they're preparing their bodies for the divorce. But you know what? Like there are so many things that people need to now be consciously aware of in terms of finances if they feel that someone might be wanting out of the marriage and kind of planning their exit strategy.
So that would definitely be a mistake from what I know is to when you think you're getting a divorce to go access funds and take money out, because when you get to court, that's all going to be coming back at you in aces. That's what I've heard. The judges don't like the fact that you would start draining the bank account.
Right. And tisk on you, because you don't want to encourage people to go to court either. And as a matter of fact, that's the other mistake that people make, is that they think that this is just going to end up in court. But there are so many other alternative dispute resolutions, alternatives to court that people can pursue. So if you're thinking about it, and another mistake people make is not arming themselves with as much information as possible about divorce process. So why not consider just negotiating an agreement through your lawyers, like do it amicably or do it through mediation. A lot of people, like that seems to be a trend I find these days, is that people want to mediate their own divorce, and using a mediator as a neutral third party who's going to help the couple come to a decision together. Like you're both involved in what the outcome is going to be. Mm-hmm. So there's mediation, there's collaborative family law, and those are lawyers, collaborative lawyers, or they're especially trained in collaborative, where they've signed an agreement with the clients that they're not going to court. And if there breaks down in any way, then the lawyers are off the file and new lawyers are brought in, and okay, so then you're probably going to go to court. But collaborative lawyers, the mindset is they are so settlement oriented. And that's the mindset that I try to get my clients into, is that they want to be settlement oriented. You don't want a battle. What happens in a battle if you go to court is that, especially if you've got children, you're going to have this relationship with your co-parent for forever. You think, once my kids are in university, I'm not going to have much of a relationship with them, but you're going to have grandchildren, you're going to have weddings. There are always going to be opportunities for you to see your partner. So can you imagine going to court and reading these affidavits of statements that are just horrific, kind of saying things that might have an element of truth, but really, what's the word I'm looking for? It's got an element of truth, but they're really embellishing it to make it sound like you're an ogre. All of a sudden, this pimple becomes, a huge tumor. So imagine then reading all this stuff in court. Your relationship is toast. Not only is your relationship toast, your relationship with the kids, for one of the parents, usually disintegrates a little bit in litigation versus mediation. And there's a great study. Bob Emery did a study, Dr. Robert Emery. And if you look at his website, Emery on Divorce, there's a great study on mediation versus litigation. And it shows the relationship between a parent and a child, and it's usually the father, in litigation versus mediation. So when the divorce is litigated, a lot of the fathers don't see their children about 4 years after the divorce. I think those are the numbers. I can't really remember 100%, so that's why you got to go to the study. Mm-hmm. But the amount of time that they're spending with their children, and now adult children, is probably minimal compared to a parent who is litigating. So you've got to look at all of the outcomes on the family. Yeah.
So the huge mistake is to think that you're just going to go to trial, and don't let a judge make the decision for you. It's never the way to go. And you know what? Once you get to trial, don't you find that with your clients, the majority of them, the outcome is really no different once a judge decides. They have just sat down and through mediation and worked it out themselves.
That's an excellent point. That is almost always the case what's going to happen. And you know what? Like when you litigate, it's the judge is making the decision. So even though it could be roughly, like the outcome could be roughly the same as what you mediated. Look at the thousands of dollars extra you spent to litigate. Yeah. So there's a huge financial cost and a huge emotional cost. It's really emotionally taxing going to court. And again, for listeners that are thinking about going to court, this is a great setup because Steve and I, we have not planned this out at all. This is just totally things as we're thinking about, as we go along. We just had a great interview with Justice Harvey Brownstone, and we talked about, and here we've got a judge encouraging our listeners to stay out of court. Yeah. You've got a stranger making decisions for you. Why do you want that? Now, the other interesting thing is only less than 5% of cases go to a full-blown trial. So you can think you're going to court and you're going to have your day in court. You're going to be Perry Mason standing up there and there's going to be this aha moment and everyone is going to see that your partner is so wrong and deserves to be fried. But you know what? That's not what happens. Usually the judge is encouraging the couple to settle and to mediate and to settle and to work things through. So, you're never really going to have that vindication that you think you're going to have. That's the truth. And it doesn't go to a full-blown trial. So oftentimes people settle. What do they say in the shadow of the court, the shadow of the I haven't been doing these shows for the last 3 months. You have to excuse me when I'm stumbling over my words. But that's what they're talking about, is that so many times you're so close to settling and you'll end up settling with that threat of trial above your head.
There's always the threat of trial. Even in my divorce, we really I never had any intention of going towards trial. I don't know if she did, and it gets very costly, and in our case it wouldn't have made a lot of sense, but I was new to the divorce process, and I'm seeing all the paperwork come through from the attorneys, and they plan as if they're going to trial, right? Because you get the interrogatories, you get a list of who they'll be calling in trial. Even though they're not going to trial, this is just part of the due diligence of the attorneys to put together the case just in case it does. But for me, that didn't know what the hell was going on, now I'm seeing all of this stuff, and that took me to a whole different level of anxiety because I don't know that this is just protocol. I just see the paperwork. I hate it. The envelopes from the attorneys. Yeah, you know how you just kept getting the lawyers' letters? I didn't even want to open the damn things. And then I'm seeing trial list. And on the list, I'm seeing family members and people my ex had selected to appear in trial. And then my mind's going, what the hell are they going to be talking about? What if, you're trying to, your mind is just racing at 1,000,000 miles an hour.
Okay, now let me point something out to our listeners. So Steve here, he is just reliving this. He's been through it. He's moved on. He is so past his divorce. But yet thinking about the court system is making you so angry. So can you imagine then when you are in that court system, how angry you are? And then you didn't even want to open up the letters going back and forth between the lawyers. But for me, I didn't want to open up my statements. Because then it's the concern, do I have enough money in the retainer? Am I going to have to write yet another check? It's so costly.
Do you know what I did?
What?
I didn't open them. I threw them in the corner. I threw all the stuff from my attorney in the corner. Okay, I think I was in a state of depression where I didn't want to look. I didn't care. I didn't care what happened anymore. It was just all too much, and I wanted it to all end. And you mentioned how emotional we can get even talking about it now. But someday we really need to address how emotional and how detrimental to our health this can be. I mean, I learned that firsthand. I've never mentioned it before on Divorce Source Radio, and our listeners don't know about my situation. You know about it.
Yeah.
But, my divorce was just very intense. And 9 days after the final hearing, I go to the health club and I'm washing in the shower and I look at my hands and they're filled with hair. I literally lost all of my hair in 9 days through what doctors call alopecia areata universalis. And it's a stress-related condition. And I truthfully believe that it was the stress of that. And if that type of stress can make that type of medical condition happen, I bet it can make other things happen. And I bet you've heard of people before that have even had heart attacks or whatever during their divorce. It's that emotional.
It's hugely emotional. And for me, like what you went through is hugely debilitating and destroying to your self-esteem. I had a pinched nerve. I just felt so tense in my emotions going through the divorce, but even thinking about divorce, I was just so tense that I had that I was in the worst pain ever. But for me, I think after about 6 months, I was able to move on and I could walk, and I didn't have any long-lasting, really debilitating problems. Although I do wake up in pain every day, and this is 15 years later. But nobody can see outwardly the effects of my pinched nerve. For you, Steve, it must be really hard. It just because you've got this reminder of what you went through in your life.
It's hard, but I think you can find blessings in all of these things. It's a checkup from the neck up where you really start to evaluate what's important to you. And yes, of course, it was a cosmetic change, and I'm dealing with it. And you can't probably see over our webcam, but I'm actually growing hair again. This is very exciting. I have a little soul patch, and things are happening. So here we are. That's a amazing. Year after this whole process, that now the body's starting to get back to normal and make things happen. But the whole message that we've kind of slid into here, Debbie, over talking about the mistakes people make, I think is so important to listeners. If you are listening to this program now and you're just entering the process of divorce, I mean, you're listening to two people that have been this path, that have been it in a very emotional way. Debbie, to the point where she's doing her whole life around it with her book, The Smart Divorce, and at touching all the lives through The Smart Divorce. And me through the radio, trying to help other people. So this is your chance to really listen to what we're saying and really understand that there are no winners in divorce. I mean, there's no point in my mind of even trying to go to trial with just but a few exceptions. Yeah.
Now, I would just want to go back a little bit. One of the things that you said to me was, did you ever think that there are times that you should consider divorce, like it's a no-brainer, that this is what you have to do? And I want to point out that if there's domestic violence, substance abuse, anything where you feel in danger, that is a no-brainer. And I really want to encourage people to get the help that they need so that they can be safe and feel safe. Because too many people feel insecure about leaving something that is so toxic for them.
Mm-hmm. I think that's important. You don't want to be in one of those situations. The question is, when did the violence start? Is it something that has been there for a while? In most cases, yes. The abuse has been there to some degree. And then you get sick and tired of it at one point, or some explosive incident happens where you end up getting a divorce. But if you catch these things early on, I don't know, am I too Pollyanna to think that, I just would like to think that if you love somebody, that there's a way that it could be worked out. Maybe separate, maybe go to counseling, when you said substance abuse, when we take our marital vows, we say for better or for worse. And substance abuse is a reality. It's an addiction, but some people can get cured from the addiction. So do you just throw the person out? Or, I like just separating. getting away. I mean, it's like being divorced, but you're not divorced. And I think legally, and I'm not a lawyer either, but I think you can put certain legal measures in place where you have some degree of protection if you're not divorced, but you're not living together. Do you know about that?
Well, I guess there's restraining orders, but really I think at the end of the day, Steve, you make an excellent point, and that is getting the help that you need. So that if there are serious anger management issues, get that help. Look at what you're going to be doing for your children. For children to be seeing the violence at home is really considered actually domestic violence on them as well. Like, can you imagine a child who is seeing a parent being beaten up by their other parent?
No.
Oh my God,
Nope.
That is destructive. And in many instances, because of this role model that they're seeing, they will become violent offenders themselves. Is that what your children, is that how you want your children to be growing up, to think that is normal behavior?
No. You have to get out of that.
So you have to get out of there. But Steve, you've got a great point. Like, get the help that you need. What other mistakes do parents make? Now, this is another interesting point that I learned when we spoke to Joan Kelly not that long ago, Dr. Joan Kelly. Less than 5% of parents actually sit down and have the conversation with their children that they're separating or divorcing.
Right. Surprise, surprise.
Now, that is such a critical conversation that parents need to have with their kids. Now, you can't always have it together. There are some parents that can't sit down together and tell their children, so they should speak to them separately. But in most instances, when parents have an amicable enough relationship that they can sit down and do what's in their children's best interest and talk to them, that would be fabulous for parents to think about to do. That's 95% of parents are making a huge mistake. So parents that are listening to the show, let's increase that 5% of parents that don't talk to their children about divorce to 95%. Mm-hmm. Let's flip the statistics. Hear,
hear. Did you tell your kids before the fact that you were thinking about this and contemplating?
I did. Now, there's certain things. There are a lot of things that I did going through my divorce which were not smart, and there were now in retrospect, there were, as I was writing the book, The Smart Divorce, and now I've launched the Smart Divorce Resource Toolkit, and a lot of it is based on many of the mistakes that I did. But one of them that was, in hindsight, was the right way to go is I consulted with a psychologist whose work really focused on families, and she told me on the script that I needed to talk to my son about, because my kids were 1, 3, and 7 at the time. So, what do you tell a 1-year-old? What do you tell a 3-year-old? But a 7-year-old, I actually sat down, with the guidance of someone, and I'm so glad I did that. And we talked about mommy and daddy separating. Now, most professionals will tell you that parents should sit down together and talk to their children. That wasn't the opportunity that was available to me, so I sat down and I told my son myself on my own. It was probably one of the most difficult conversations I've ever had in my whole life, and one that I didn't want to have. So I can understand why parents don't want to do it, but how can you not? Mm-hmm. Like, if you really want to look at what's in the best interest of your children, like so mom's living in, one room, all of a sudden, mom's living in one room and dad's living in another room, and, mom and dad are barely talking, and they're living in the same house, and now they're not even socializing. So now, visiting grandparents without the other parent, kids are so much smarter than we give them credit for. So that was what happened with me. And you know what? I'm glad that I actually sat down and talked to my son about it. And it was a challenge, and he had some rough times to work through. And I also went to a child psychiatrist. Like, I believe in bringing in all these different professionals and helping me work through different, processes and issues and everything else. That's just me. And I went to child psychiatrists to help me understand what behaviors were a result of divorce and what were just, my kid's stage of life. And, I have to tell you that a lot of it was my kid's stage of life, not because of divorce. If you really are a parent that really does put your children's best interest first, you can minimize the impact of divorce on kids.
That's a great point, especially if you have kids in their teens, because if you've told them about the divorce, now you may think they're acting a certain way because they're against you or angry at you, when in fact they may just be acting that way because they're a teen. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. I was talking to a client the other day, and he said to me, my daughter just spends a lot of time in her bedroom alone. And I said, your daughter's spending a lot of time in her bedroom alone because she's probably BBMing her friends on her BlackBerry, and she's on her computer doing, I don't know, watching some shows. Like, I just know this from my kids. They're not acting out. Like, if parents think that their kids are spending so much time with their co-parent at their home and they're not spending any time with you, let's do a reality check here. Teenagers, as close a relationship as you have with your kids, their focus is on their own social relationships, not on their parents. Mm-hmm. So you have to come to that understanding. My kids are away. I'll tell you a funny story. Like, here it is. My kids are away at overnight camp. They're both counselors, and this was their summer job. And already they're coming home. They're not looking to spend some quality time with their mother and their father. No. Already they come home on Friday. Saturday there's a camp reunion, and Monday there's a big camp party. Like, they spent the whole summer with these kids, and all of a sudden, like, they're going to miss them after 2 days, but they're spending the whole week. So they're not planning their time to spend time with mom and to spend time with dad and when they're going to see all these other people. No. Now they're excited to come home and catch up on the last 24 hours that they didn't get to sleep over in, the cabins together. So teenagers are fickle. Mm-hmm. Teenagers are really self-centered and they want to focus on their social life. And you know what? Good for them. That's what they should be focusing on, and that's healthy. They shouldn't be worried about, is mom okay and is dad okay?
Right. I can see how we might amplify that, though, when we're going through a divorce, because it's tough when you're, as a couple, and your kids are all of a sudden now more distant to you because they've got their own life, but you've still got your spouse. But when you're new to a divorce and now you're at home alone perhaps, and the kids are around, but they're not choosing to be with you, it's, you're amplifying that they don't want to be with you.
Yeah, that's true. And you know what? And I don't want to minimize this at all. Your children are hurting just as much as you're hurting. And they might even be hurting more. I mean, their world has just been rocked. The rug's been pulled out from under their feet. Like, here it's not status quo anymore. And now there's a lot of concerns, especially for teenagers. What's going to happen to my social life? What's going to happen to, our finances? Like, where am I going to be living? Like, they've got all of these concerns. Mm-hmm. And parents need to really understand, too, that kids are smart. And I've seen kids play one parent against the other. And so you have to be really cognizant of that. And I've also heard, you've got these teenagers who are saying to mom, I'm going to be at dad's tonight. And they say to dad, I'm going to be at mom's tonight. Where, they're really at a boyfriend or girlfriend's house, or they're doing something that they know that mom doesn't want them to do or dad doesn't want them to do. So you really do have to be a little bit more in tune with what's happening with your kids.
And that's where you're at a disadvantage if you don't have a relationship with your ex that you can communicate about that, because that's kind of a mistake. You both think they're somewhere else and they're not, and there's no checks and balance.
I know. And the other thing that is really difficult if you don't have communication with your co-parent, as they say, is that if your child acts out in a way, like I was speaking to a client the other day, and his daughter's 16 years old. She was caught smoking pot with friends. And the mother said to the father, it's your fault she was on your watch. But you know what? His daughter was out with their friends, and it could have happened just as easily on her watch. Mm-hmm. Or it could have just happened just as easily had they been married. These are some of the things that teenagers want to do. They want to kind of experiment. And so the message is not, it's your fault, but let's work together, or you work independently. You're parallel parenting, but you can't keep on putting the blame on each parent because something's happening while they should be when they're with you. Especially, for little kids, I remember my daughter who was 5 years old, and she was experimenting with a friend with scissors, and they gave each other haircuts. Okay, maybe it was a little bit to blame there. It was a little quiet. I was doing some baking. That was under my watch, and that I was truly guilty for. But, for something for a teenager where you cannot monitor your kids 24/7, I think you really have to work really hard at co-parenting together.
How about the potential mistake of giving your kids too much leeway because you're divorced and you don't want to discipline as you would have if you were still together? And I think that I'm a little guilty of that. I think that I give my kid more slack and don't ride him as much as I normally would have.
Huge mistake. That's an excellent point. Oftentimes, I could say the primary parent, again, I hate to use these labels, but, we just sort of have to use them for explanation purposes. So the primary parent is afraid to parent their kids a little bit too much because they think that their children won't want to live with them anymore. And then the parent who has the visitation, I hate that, but, the parent who has the children less time is afraid to discipline their kids because they're afraid that the kids aren't going to want to come and visit them as much. I don't want to say visit. The kids don't want to come and spend as much time with them anymore. But really, you know what? You're doing a big disservice to your kids. What's going to happen to the kids in the next generation? They're growing up indulged. They think the world revolves around them. They think there are no rules and guidelines. So at the end of the day, I think really what you have to do as parents, especially parents of divorce, and I try and listen, I am not perfect and I am guilty of certain things, but you really do have to set rules and structure and guidelines. And that's really your kid's best interest. Kids will push parents. So, it doesn't matter if parents are married or divorced. Kids will push parents as far as they can go. Kids will push a divorced parent that much further because they know that sometimes that there's a little bit of guilt. There's a little bit of hardship there, and kids know that they can get away with it. And that's when you have to sort of pull back and say, you know what? Now, I admit, I'll let my kids come back a little bit later, they'll break curfews or whatever, but you know what? Certain things, for me, there is no leeway. You got to do your homework, and there are a lot of parents that say to the kids, it's okay. You don't have to do your work. Because as a matter of fact, a lot of kids at the beginning of the divorce process, their marks fall quite dramatically. And you know what? Being emotionally, being an emotional trauma, that can happen. But not 2 or 3 years post-divorce to say that that's okay anymore. You've got to really focus on certain things. And to say that it's not okay to, it's okay not to go to school. I've heard that, Johnny doesn't want to go to school today, so I'm going to let him stay home. What's that about?
Right.
Or, Mary doesn't want to go visit, mom today or, dad today. She just has a headache. What's that about? So I think that you really do need to have some rules and structure in place. And you know what? I will tell you, I feel that your children will respect you more for it.
So keep a proper level of discipline, but on the other side of that coin, don't try to buy your kids. We've talked about on some of your programs before where the dad wants to buy the kid the 50-inch big screen, where before when they were married, they didn't have that. And mom and dad wouldn't allow them to have it in his room. And now he's got that, and he's got the game station. And I forget who the guest was that was talking about this, but she said the older kids are even more vulnerable. Because, dad will buy him a car or whatever if you stay with me. So that's a real big mistake.
That's bribery. And again, you're creating these indulged kids. So that's called the Disney dad, where, sorry, dads, it could be a Disney mom, I guess, too, for, for a mother. But you don't want to buy your kids. What messages are you sending out to your children that if you do things my way, I'm going to buy you X. If you don't do things my way, then you're not getting it. Or if you spend more time with me, then you're going to get Y. You're going to get that big screen TV. You're going to get that Xbox. I'm going to buy you that iPad, whatever it is. You should be doing these things the same way you would be doing them when you were married. Mm-hmm. And I remember, but the hard thing is if you were, parents had different values. So, let's use the TV as an example. There are some parents that say, I don't think there's anything wrong if, my kids have a TV in their room. And during the course of the marriage, the parent that said that kind of lost out on that battle and the kids didn't have a TV in their room. Yet when the divorce happened, kids get TV in their room, with the parent that had that attitude that it's okay. So when parents have different values, parenting values, it doesn't really matter anymore because you can't influence it unless your children are in danger.
Yeah. In our final few minutes, anything else, any major mistakes we need to go over?
I think the major mistakes are people need to really think about the impact of divorce on themselves and in the family and do that introspective work first. I believe very strongly that there are two divorces that you're going through, the emotional divorce and the legal divorce. And really understand that in the legal divorce, it's a business transaction. It's whatever the reasons were behind the divorce don't matter. So don't expect that you're going to get more, you're going to get a windfall. If you didn't have a certain lifestyle, don't expect that you're going to have that windfall. It's the unrealistic expectations. And on the emotional side, take the time to really work through it. And read The Smart Divorce. That'll really help you.
I want to talk to you more about that in just a second. But my big message to everyone is hey, what's the hurry? There is no hurry. Slow down. Slow the process down. There's no hurry to get divorced. If you need to separate, think it through. Take your time. Let things cool off. You like?
I love that message. I think that it's a perfect message. And I actually will mention that to a lot of people too. Can you imagine being told on Monday that by your partner that I'm getting a divorce and I want you to see a lawyer on Wednesday? Now, the person that's had made this announcement, they've gone through the grieving process. They've sort of figured it out. How can you all of a sudden go to the lawyer 2 days later and make it happen?
It's hard.
You need some time to process it.
Right.
And I urge the listeners who are kind of blindsiding their partner with the decision to give their partner a little bit of time to adapt to this new reality.
Mm-hmm. The saying, the divorce can only go as fast as the slowest person, that kind of applies here?
Absolutely. I think that quote's in my book. I guess everybody uses that quote. Information is knowledge and knowledge is power. I guess the same cliches work.
Mm-hmm. Well, most of our listeners know who you are from your Smart Divorce show here, but for those who don't, Deborah Moskovich is a divorce consultant, and a divorce consultant is someone that can help you through your divorce. And why don't you briefly, in a thumbnail, or on our last couple of minutes here, explain what it is you do and how listeners can get in touch with you, because I really think that it's important, if you're in the new process of a divorce, to talk to someone like Deborah to help avoid making mistakes that you could make. Now, Deborah's based out of Toronto, Canada, but it matters not. She deals with people all over the country.
Yeah, all across North America. Divorce is a process, and that's what I want people to see it as, not a crisis. And you need to arm yourself with as much information as possible. So we talked about so many different things in the show. We talked about the financial aspects of divorce and putting your children's best interest first and the dispute resolutions. Those are all the issues that we talk about in my consulting service. And so in an hour, we can cover all the aspects of divorce. I can save you thousands of dollars by preparing you properly to go see all the different professionals. I mean, isn't it great to go see a lawyer being prepared and understanding of process rather than spending a few hours getting that information? At least you'll know the questions to ask.
Oh, heck yeah. And I mean, that's no BS, people. I mean, this is like a guarantee. I mean, you can actually guarantee with the Smart Divorce that if people call you and listen to your information, it's not going to cost them. They're going to save thousands of dollars.
They're going to save time, as the subtitle of my book says, save time, money, and your sanity. But the other thing is there's a lot of people that are so afraid. They don't know how to work with the lawyer. They don't know of the different resources like a parenting coordinator or a financial planner. There's so many resources available to you, and I will refer my clients to resources across North America that are going to help them through the process. And now people will say, well, Deborah, it costs so much money, but it also costs a lot of money to make mistakes. And we can talk about different ways to use the individuals or to just use the learning so that it'll help you through the process more effectively. At the end of the day, everybody wants a smart divorce where they learn. Divorce is rich in opportunity to learn and grow from, and that's what you want. Steve, I look at you and you went through a horrible time and I went through a really difficult time too, but at the end of the day, we're happy, and that's what you want. 10 years, I've been now divorced for 15 years. And I have to say that I'm leading a great life. I don't look back with regrets. And I think that's what you want, so that even if you make some kind of mistakes, it's learning to live with those mistakes that you've made. And I really try to help educate my clients. Information is knowledge, and knowledge is power.
That's a lot of our show intro there. But it's all true. It's all good. And your website is thesmartdivorce.com.
That's right. So if anyone wants to contact me, email info@thesmartdivorce.com, or feel free to call my office, 905-695-0270.
Call her. You're going to save money. I mean, really. That's the bottom line. I wish I would have called you. I wish I would have known you were there when I was going through my divorce. Oh.
That's what many people said. And I have to say that for me, it's really gratifying being able to help people through their divorce.
Oh, heck
I love it. It's a passion. And it's a passion being on this show. It's a passion to have the Smart Divorce on Divorce Source Radio, just educating people about the process. Divorce is so much more than just that separation agreement. Mm-hmm. Your file is closed. Your lawyer moves on to the next file. But you're living with so much. You're living a life of, reconfiguring, rethinking, what does life mean as a single person now versus, being a married couple? What does life mean as a single parent versus being, two parents at home? The co-parenting relationship is so much. How do you create a happy and fulfilling life? There's so much to do. Mm-hmm. And I actually look at divorce today and where I was, and I think to myself, I have really been able to take control of my life and develop something that's fabulous.
Yeah.
And that's really what I want people to do, is say, right now, when you're in the thick of things, and I know that you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel, the forest through the trees, and all those other cliches, and it looks really hopeless, but I will tell you that if you do the homework and you do the work, you will get through it. But you've got to do that emotional work yourself. Nobody can do it for you. And there you have it.
Debbie and I hate labels, but we love cliches. They're the best. Hey, Deborah, thanks so much for doing the show with us. I know our listeners will have benefited greatly, and we're all looking forward to your next show on The Smart Divorce right here on DivorceSourceRadio.com. And listeners, if you want to find out when the new programs come out by Debbie, you can simply go to Twitter and follow us. Our follow word is Divorce Source. And if you'd like to write us an email, you can reach us at divorcesourceradio@gmail.com. Thanks again, Deborah. I'll talk to you next time on your show.
Pleasure.